Welcome to Torah Smash, the podcast for nerdy Jews, where our lives of Jewish learning collide with our love of nerd culture. In each episode, we discuss what we lovingly call a Torah Smash, which we have defined as a beautiful collision of one thing from the world of Judaism with another from nerd culture. I am RDY, and joining me today are
Barack Malkin.
Ethan Lane Miller.
Today, I would like to invite the two of you to step into my mind.
Oh no.
It's a dangerous place. It's so messy here. Clean
It
up.
really is so much to clean up. The mind is a complex thing, full of thoughts and emotions, memories, beliefs, facts, and opinions. Be careful, those last two look a lot alike. Sometimes our minds are represented as a maze of pink coils and gray matter, and sometimes our minds are shown to us as a bustling HQ with memories in the form of marbles, sitting on shelves that get cleared out daily as our emotions guide us by using a giant control panel. That's right. Today, we are discussing Pixar's incredibly successful properties, Inside Out and Inside Out 2.
My older one calls it Inside Out Season 2.
Child of a nerd. Inside Out 1 was nominated for 3 Oscars and won 1 for Best Animated Feature. And across the awards circuit, it took in another 97 wins and 113 other nominations.
Wow.
Yeah. Inside Out 2 has not been through awards season at the time of recording, but as of today, as we record, it is Pixar's highest grossing film to date.
And we're in
So first-
mid-July. Yeah.
Sorry? Yeah, we're recording in mid-July.
Yeah.
And first question, what did you think of the movie?
I loved it. I loved the first one. I was still living in New Jersey at the time, and we had just started really diving into doing a lot of mental health programming for kids. And so this young woman who was a co-facilitator with me, we went and saw it, and we talked a lot afterwards. It was so good. And then Inside Out 2, I actually saw it with RDY yesterday in preparation for this recording.
Look at Barack's
Yeah,
face.
Barack. Sorry, Barack.
Listeners,
fine.
Barack's lips disappeared for a moment as he trembled with jealousy listening to Ethan say that.
And I just remember, like, at the end of it, I turned to you, I was like, that was great. Like, both of them were deep and provocative, and I think best of all, just really clever. Really clever.
Yeah, they're super clever. And I will, just to note, and Barack, I want to hear your opinion of it more before I tell mine, but the watch through yesterday was my second viewing.
Wow.
Yeah, it's that good.
I really enjoyed the first one, and when I've rewatched the first one, I still cry. I don't cry for Bing Bong anymore, but I still cry when she comes back from the bus station. That still gets me every time.
Yeah.
I've come to appreciate Inside Out 2 as I've dwelled on it and thought about it. My initial reaction at the end of the movie was it felt like a rinse and repeat. It was people from the headquarters are not in the headquarters and they have to make their way back. People are at the controls that don't know what's going on, and Riley has to overcome that situation. There's a lot of fun adventure mixed in, but it was the same of the emotions are controlling what's happening, and that's wrong. And it felt like very similar to me. So in that vein, I didn't love that. I wished there was not more creative, it's very creative, but a more unique plot line. Then it just felt like a repeated plot line from the first one, but different story. But overall, like, I get the age difference and this expansion of emotions and belief systems, really fascinating, and I enjoyed that. But so I have like a mixed feeling on Inside Out 2.
I think the fact that it is formulaic, going from the first movie to the second movie, is what makes it so helpful to do both movies as one Torah Smash.
Sure. Oh, yeah, I would agree.
I also wrote in my notes that I thought it would be the kind of pun fest that you would absolutely love.
Loved the brainstorm.
The brainstorm
Yeah,
was so...
the sarcasm was
Oh my God.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I also like that the 4 characters that were on the one end of the sarcasm, 3 out of 4 of them said something to the workers across the chasm that got sarcasmified.
Yeah.
And the only one who didn't was anger, because you don't need to.
Yeah.
I will say that, like, first and foremost, I do love both of these movies. The first one still holds up. I watched it again a few days ago. I know it's only 9 years later. And the second one even though it was the same kind of movie with more characters, it had enough difference to keep me entertained and enough similarities to keep nostalgia satiated.
Mhm.
I think when it comes to the first movie, I disagree with Pete Docter, the director, who says that there's no antagonist. I think that Joy in the first movie is like maybe she's the anti-protagonist or the unintentional antagonist, but she is the one who creates conflict, even though she's also the one who has to fix it. She blames sadness for being what sadness is, and things get better when she realizes that sadness is there for a positive reason. And in the second movie, anxiety is the clear antagonist. There is not a problem with, we think there's no protagonist, and I do. She's absolutely the antagonist, and joy and the OG emotions are the protagonists. I like that she becomes part of the team at the end when she and Joy both realize that they were kind of both being antagonists by not letting Riley make her own beliefs. You know, like you could, yeah, yes, sometimes emotions have the controls, but the controls don't tell us who we are. And I loved that. I also loved that the belief system, in order to get down to the belief system, they had to pass through the forgotten memory graveyard from the first movie. So
Yeah.
that was cool. I also absolutely love that in both movies, the emotions step out of their lanes, much more so in the second movie. In the second movie, joy cries, sadness beams with a smile, fear feels drawn to someone new.
Yes.
It's more realistic because emotions are complicated. And yes, things can be boiled down to 5 emotions for a kids movie. And I once read when I was doing a real Judaism class, REEL, on Inside Out 1, I read that while they were in planning meetings, they came up with 26 different emotions and they wrote a script that had 14.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and they settled on 5 because they thought people could keep track of 5. So thank you, Pixar.
In addition to that, they had done that shift as well because the age range I forget the university, Berkeley, I think it was. I think Berkeley Science helped them study this, and there was this, piece of it where when you're younger, you have a lot of emotions, but they are a little bit, I'll call, simpler, and as you grow up, those emotions become a little more complicated. And so even Inside Out 2 had, I think, 4 or 5 other characters originally scripted, some of them also drawn and sketched. And I'm very curious about those shifts and decisions. There's one that I disagreed with that when we get to it, I'll talk about it more of who I think they should have swapped out. But overall,
I think it is.
we'll get when we get there, we'll talk about it. But yeah, it was fascinating. I love that Pixar always does a lot of work to make sure that their stuff is pretty spot on. So thoroughly, I appreciated that.
Before we get really into the smash,
yeah,
I want to talk afikomen.
Okay.
Because Pixar is famous for afikomen.
Yeah, you were afikomen hunting yesterday.
I was, because on my second watch, I was hunting. So like things that I remember from the first movie are like in Imagination Land, the Jack, Queen, and Kings on the cards and the playing cards were Riley and her mom and dad.
Oh, fun.
The guards in front of the vault were supposed to be an homage to Waiting for Godot. And in the first movie, they have an argument about wearing each other's hats.
Well,
I
it says
wrote
my
my hat on my hat. No, I wrote my hat in my hat.
Yeah.
And then in the second movie, when they have that thing where he bowls them over, so to speak, and they kind of fall on each other, one of their hats falls off, and the label facing the camera says "my hat."
Yeah, I saw that.
I was like, "Oh my god,
it's good."
I would have missed that if I hadn't seen Inside Out a few days ago.
Oh, that's so good.
The sleeping areas in the second movie are so detailed. There's no way I could get everything. But when it comes on Disney Plus, I am pausing that screen, no doubt.
Yeah.
But I did notice a fire extinguisher and a punching bag in Anger's area.
He also has a sprinkler on the top too, like a fire sprinkler.
I didn't catch that.
Yeah. And he sleeps on a brick.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And I noticed a box of tissues in Sadness's area. And I noticed that Joy's was decorated with little stars to mirror Riley's bedroom.
Yeah. I loved that Fear had like dozens of nightlights.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Nightlights. I was like, Christmas lights?
No, it's straight to the dark. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also caught, and this one's for you, Barack. I found Big Bong.
Yeah, I know. He's in the bedroom scene.
and it's like an origami bing bong next to Joy's bed.
Why is that for me? What are you saying?
Because that's the part where you cried and where I
Oh,
cried.
in the first one. Yeah, I gotcha.
And
The only Jewish character in the first movie.
and what I love about him being in origami as an afikomen is that it's a way for the Pixar people to say, we know he's one of your favorite characters, and we know that if we could bring him back, we would, but he really is gone. So they're able to say, here's your guy. I did not. I was looking for certain like typical Pixar things. I was looking for A113. I did not see it.
It was the number on the vault.
On the vault?
Mm-hmm.
Nice. I did not see the Luxo ball, the ball with the yellow side with the star on it. I didn't see that. I did find the Pixar lamp. The Pixar desk lamp was on the
Where
coach.
was that?
So the red notebook was spotlit
Oh, okay.
by the lamp.
That's fun.
I absolutely loved the Lance slash blade moving like a 90s video game, and he gets like stuck on the wall and he only moves in right angles. Like it's really cool. I also saw Riley's dad do this thing where there's been this thing on the internet for the last 9 years about people who think that he's hot. And shout out to Kyle MacLachlan, original Dune and great actor who voices the dad. So this whole like we think the dad is hot thing, I think got a shout out when the kids are in the car. He drops them off at camp and he looks at mom and goes, "What are we gonna do this weekend?" And then he
bites his lip,
his lower lip, and then it like the camera kind of pans into the three girls in the back seat, but he's still there. His biting his lip is still in the foreground. It's so funny. Yeah, those were the ones I found. So any other afikomen I might have missed?
I mean, I really was just focused on taking it in.
Yeah.
So,
well, I have some more, but we'll chat. Maybe they'll pop up in conversation, and if not, I'll.
Okay. I mean, maybe it's not afikomen in the sense. It's more of a plot thing than afikomen thing. So I'll hold on to it.
Okay. Do you want to say it as like your opinion of the plot?
I appreciated that many more of the memory marbles were multicolor.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it showed maturity of Riley.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I think is also a big point of the second movie. The first movie, at the very end, the marbles started to marble.
Yeah.
And I loved that. And there were some in the second movie that had more than two colors.
There were a few that were three,
which is really cool. Any idea what is the Jewish concept that I might think Inside Out 1 and 2 are teaching us?
Something that came to mind when I watched it, because I had just come home from Spertus and I had a class on building effective work relationships. Shout out to Dr. Rob Weinberg. We talked about the saboteurs and the sage. If any professionals have done that work of talking about your saboteurs, it's not a Jewish concept.
Right.
So the closest thing to that I can think of is the idea of Mussar, of these values that swing one way but should swing the other way, or could swing the other way.
You just get it, bro?
That's it. Yeah.
Oh,
hooray!
Yeah, Mussar. I know that we've talked about Mussar in kind of a mentioning it sort of way when we talked about Anava, humility, with Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. But I want to go a little more vague into Mussar than just the attribute of Anava, humility, and delve into Mussar itself. So Mussar, the word means correction, though in modern Hebrew, people use it to mean ethics. It is the study of midot, which again is a word that has multiple meanings. It means measurements, but it's usually used to mean values. Rabbi Barry Block, great guy, translates a midot as soul traits, which I like a lot. And soul traits then are the things that make up our lives and how to connect to them in such a way that we maintain a tikkun midot, which using Rabbi Block's definition would be soul trait repairing. So we don't let any one of them take the wheel in too strong a fashion because it can be destructive. So when anxiety goes into that anxiety storm, she's way too overbalanced on that side of anxiety. But anxiety, as she describes herself, is preparedness.
Yes. That is something I really loved about this movie, is how it explored that, it took emotions that could be stereotypically viewed as negative. And what we saw was anxiety. There's a real purpose to it, which we know biologically comes from survival. Like we get anxious over snakes because, well, probably because snakes kill a lot of people and being scared helps us survive in an evolution. Like I loved that you saw that anxiety was using the anxiety to plan and plan and plan. And then it fell apart when the plan didn't go the way it was anticipated. Like I thought that was
Right.
really well done.
Yeah, me too. And then she tried to shape who Riley was in her image instead of in Riley's image. And Joy was guilty of the same thing.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah, I agree with Ethan. All of these new emotions that showed up have these negative connotations to them. But and that's while I was watching the movie, like all of them have a what I'll say, they can swing all the way to the positive side if you want them to. And that's where the idea of the Mussar had come into my head.
Yeah.
And so I'll mention this is the one spot that I think they should have changed one of the new characters. And some of the ones that they didn't bring in that they thought about were Schadenfreude, shame, and another one was guilt. And I think guilt would have been a better replacement for embarrassment.
Oh,
Because
interesting.
because because embarrassment to me, his person like that trait doesn't scream I'm going to turn away from what's going on because I don't agree with it. I'm going to help out sadness in the background. Embarrassment to me does like it's just secretly hiding and doing stuff. But if guilt was in the movie, guilt 100% would have a similar reaction to embarrassment in some senses, but would have given itself more to that idea of, oh, I feel guilty that we pushed everybody to the back of the mind, and I'm going to help sadness repair that. I think guilt would have served it better.
I think guilt, shame, and embarrassment are all in that same spectrum.
Right.
Where I liked it being embarrassment. I suppose whatever the character was, it could have been the big, strong, shy brute.
Right.
But what I liked about it being embarrassment is I felt embarrassment is one end of it where, like self-awareness is the kind of the positive side of embarrassment, in my humble opinion. And then shame is the negative side. And like, it's healthy to be a little embarrassed. I'm embarrassed every time I'm on the bema and I make a mistake and I say, oops, and I move on. But I think I think embarrassment can be that like healthy medium. Whereas guilt to me does feel a little bit more guilt and shame, a little bit more negative.
I mean, I'm now running through the plot again, and I'm wondering how different is it if it's guilt? And I feel like it could potentially change the way Riley reacts when she starts making fun of the like preteen boy band and starts like, oh no, I'm not into that. Or the guilt of ditching her friends.
Yeah.
There's a positive, like, yes, there's that downside of you hide away and you sort of shut down, but the positive of the guilt is that you apologize and you have humbleness because you realize that what you did was wrong. Or
guilt is also about having a conscience.
Right. I don't think embarrassment lays itself to there. Yeah.
Yeah. Schadenfreude is just enjoying the embarrassment.
Right. Which is why they didn't include it. Same with shame doesn't really feel to have a positive aspect of shame.
Yeah.
I forget what the other ones were, but yeah.
I thought you were going to say ennui. Because to me, boredom doesn't seem like an emotion. To me, boredom seems like a state of being or it seems more external.
See, and I was thinking apathy might have been.
Yeah, apathy is an emotion. Boredom is an occurrence.
I guess because you can feel bored, and there are times when it's good to feel bored. That's good because it brings you to other areas, but ennui doesn't represent like creativity and the things that come out of boredom. He's just the blahs and just.
I wonder if I'm biased, like employing a bunch of young adults and high schoolers, but like I see apathy way much more than I see boredom.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that like ennui being a French word gave them a pass at making fun of the French. But I feel like it would be too easy to turn guilt into a stereotypical Jewish accent, kind of thing. And
maybe
Jewish grandmother.
Yeah, well, I was going to say the only Jewish character in this one was Nostalgia.
So I want to dip into that for a second too, because that little door that she came out of exists in HQ in the first movie, but they don't use it.
Right. So, it was a cut scene. It was supposed to be Anger's sauna. And so the structure in their 3D development was structured there. And so you see parts of it in the outside, but they cut those scenes. So they kept the structure and made it made it the door that the new emotions come through.
Oh, cool.
That's cool. I like it better as the door the new emotions come through because I like the fact that we can shut away our emotions sometimes. And also like the inside the mom and dad's head, we see mom's anxiety and dad's anxiety, but we don't see their boredom, ennui, or embarrassment.
Yeah.
I wish their nostalgias came out. I wanted that. I wanted the
Yeah.
parents' nostalgia to come out.
I
remember when I went to camp as a kid.
I love that nostalgia was kind of sent away, but like it's not your time yet because nostalgia is, I mean, it was created as a little old lady and it does seem like an older emotion, but I've seen my kids on their cell phones. They love to look at pictures they took last week.
Yeah.
So it's
Good point.
yeah, I think there is a modicum of nostalgia that peeks its head out the door every now and again.
Right.
And I think there is like that embarrassment exists in my mind, but like I mentioned, I deal with it and it goes away again. So like my embarrassment sits behind a door most of the time. Sometimes I let embarrassment take the wheels intentionally when I want to embarrass my children. But that's another story for another podcast.
Hey there, listeners. Your favorite Torah Smash trio is interrupting this episode to share some exciting news.
That's right. Our podcast just celebrated our 2-year anniversary, but this adventure isn't over yet.
We're on a quest to ensure Torah Smash can continue to cast its charm spell on you for the next 5 years.
With your support, we can continue to share our epic tales, nerdy rants, and even more questionable puns.
But friends, even podcasts with dozens and dozens of listeners need a little boost from time to time. That's where you come in.
We're not asking for gold pieces or magic artifacts, although we won't say no if you have any lying around. We're simply asking for your support. Go to torasmash.com/donate to help keep the fun going.
So if you've enjoyed listening to us while you sort your Legos, organize your comics, or prepare for your next dungeon crawl, consider supporting the podcast during this epic summer fundraiser by going to torasmash.com/donate.
We've set up fundraising milestones, but anything that you can give to help keep the lights on in our virtual studio is greatly appreciated.
Plus, if we reach our top fundraising goal, we'll be able to host some live shows, and you can see for yourself that I'm not a Muppet.
RDY, I finally got the chance to meet you in person, and I gotta be honest, I'm still not convinced.
And back to the ad spot. Listeners, go to torasmash.com/donate. And if you're unable to support us financially, leaving a 5-star review wherever you listen helps us just as much on Torah Smash's 5-year quest.
Torah Smash!
Assemble!
I want to go back to the Jewish Smash. In Pirkei Avot, Shimon ben Zoma, a sage from the turn of the 2nd century CE, says, "Who is strong? The one who conquers the evil inclination. As it is said, better is one slow to anger than a strong person, and one who rules over the spirit than a conqueror of a city." In other words, if we can control our emotions, we show true strength.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And we've talked before about the Yetzer HaTov and the Yetzer Hara, the good inclination and the evil inclination, respectively. In an old school cartoon, those two things would be shown as a devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other.
Yeah.
But Judaism encourages us to be in touch with our emotions, and Mussar especially. So we acknowledge the Yetzer Hara as much as the Yetzer HaTov. Judaism doesn't ask us to get rid of negative emotions. In fact, there's a story of a bunch of famous sages putting negative emotions in a barrel and sealing them away. And all this terrible stuff starts happening in the world because you need that balance.
Wait, what? Hold on. What story is this? Because this is Inside Out 2 that you just described.
Yeah, I guess so. But it's also, I don't know the source, and it wasn't in my notes. It's just in my head.
Is it a Jewish story?
Yeah, the rabbis, they put away they capture and seal away the Yetzer Hara, and nobody does anything, and nobody feeds themselves, and nobody procreates because greed becomes making a living, and gluttony becomes nutrition, and lust becomes satisfying our life partners and making babies. So this is anxiety too. Anxiety to me is the obvious example because when she was out of control, she took over everything.
Yeah.
You know, she was the big brother from the 1984 Apple commercial. She used embarrassment as an enforcer to get rid of the original five so she could run the panel. And eventually she gave Riley an anxiety attack. And I thought that that was an absolutely brilliant, without having to say the words anxiety attack.
Yeah.
I thought it was absolutely brilliant.
They showed, didn't have to tell.
Yeah.
One of the things this movie helped remind me of is something that I think through, or that I've had to think through a couple times at work this summer, is on the one hand, I don't want to be angry at the high schoolers I employ because I recognize that their brains are not fully developed, and also the world that they're growing up in is not the world I'm growing up in.
Yeah.
And I also balance the idea with like, sometimes showing anger is a great way to show how serious you are, to show how serious the situation is. And so there have been a few moments where I feel my anger rising and I make a choice to like not unscrew the top, but like loosen it a little, let some of it vent on out, and then try and like quickly cover it up and screw the top again.
In Mussar, they would call that moving the match away from the fuse.
Mm,
So this idea that you don't want to blow up, but having that heat and passion can be very instructive to people who you lead. If it wasn't for anger, we would not have a Martin Luther King Jr. You know, that a lot of the preachers of that era were, you know, spitting fire from the mountaintop. And that was because we were angry at how things are. A lot of things that are happening today get fixed when people get angry, and a lot of things don't because all they do is get angry.
Yeah.
So you have to turn your anger into voting.
The thing that I like about Mussar, I probably mentioned on the last Mussar one, is that idea of the balance in between, right? If you just, an example one of my friends had used when I was in LA, looking at the Jewish value of savlanut, patience.
Yeah.
The example that she struggled with when she was studying Mussar and this value was, say you're in the supermarket, right? She had a trouble with patience, so she was very impatient, and so would get frustrated that there was such a long line at the checkout register, right? So that's one end of it. But if you swing all the way to the other end of it and super patient, you just let everybody go in front of you, and then you're never going anywhere because you're just so patient. And you've just got to find that middle ground of just moving along with the line. But I think there are times when, you know, I think that center spot of the Mussar practice is really good. And I think sometimes you have to swing slightly in or out, but you have to acknowledge where you should return to when the time is right. But being on those extremes, they teach is like not very good. There's always sort of a downside when you're on those extremes, but finding that center space properly, I think is helpful, which is what these movies do, right? In a sense, the taking joy and anxiety, removing everything and pushing themselves to the front makes it either way too joyful or way too anxiety, right? When Riley is too joyful, she acts out and is too silly at the practices. And so there's the downside, right? All of these other new emotions that came in, we have these perceived downsides, and they were able to show us that joy can have downsides too when not used properly. And
yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even that the first movie did the same thing, where sadness is seen as a negative and she was the hero. So some of the midot, some of the values that are a part of Mussar that I find particularly meaningful in my life. You mentioned Sablanut, that's a big part of it. Patience. Anger is another one that affects me a lot. And often one leads to the other.
Mhm.
And humility is also something that I struggle with, not in the same direction. I tend to be very self-deprecating. And that's a negative use of humility, you know, towards the direction that we don't always think of it. Not anti-humble, not where I'm like so proud of myself that I think I'm the best, but the other side of the scale. I have a friend who often tells me that he doesn't understand how I'm so patient.
Mm.
And my immediate reaction most of the time he says that is, I wouldn't be friends with you if I wasn't. But but the fact is, I'm only able to be patient because it's something that I've worked on my whole life. And to be able to say, I don't need things to happen right away my way. I need things to happen the right way in the right amount of time. It's something that we struggle with as a society. Look at anything major that happens on the news. We hear the thing that happens and we immediately get some correct and some incorrect information, but we say them all. We say everything we know.
Or even thinking about like a workplace environment, people who maybe prioritize speed over accuracy.
Yeah.
Like when I think about data collection and reporting, like I don't do it that much, but when I do, like reporting surveys or whatever, or data, like I want it to be timely and also correct. And I recognize there's a balance in those things.
Yeah. I think that when it comes to learning that balance, it really is that difference between who's driving the ship. Are we letting our emotions have all the control, or are we recognizing our beliefs and what is core inside us, and maybe even coming to a point where we understand which marbles have formed which strings?
Oh,
Yeah.
that's good.
I'm curious what, if they do a next one, I'm curious what the next one's path will be of,
Oh, I'm so
right?
glad you're asking.
There's still more emotions they haven't dealt with. There's more subconscious things we haven't talked about, right?
High school.
Right.
It's high school.
We've done feelings, we've done beliefs. So something with hormones, but that doesn't feel appropriate for a Pixar movie. Maybe. I don't know.
High school is a good guess.
I think it's high school. Barack, like, I hope it's hormones. I hope it's that continued journey of self-discovery. I hope it's more, I hope it's a little more like rebellion with her parents. Like, I'm not usually one who's like, oh, this needs a sequel. I'm very comfortable being like, this doesn't need a sequel. I really want there to be an Inside Out 3, and I hope it explores high school. Or it goes really bold and like jumps ahead even more, and she's in college.
College would be neat. I think moving to college and at the same time, a grandparent dies.
Yeah.
Because I see both of these movies as periods of great transformation and loss. So in the first movie, it was loss of home. In the second movie, it was loss of friendship. And in the first movie, home, that family island, that was the big one, and that's home. And it's starting to crumble and crack. Whereas in the second movie, Friendship Island is bigger. And when they say that, you're like, uh-oh, something's gonna happen to Friendship Island.
Yeah.
And so she's got this loss of friends and a little bit of loss of self. Puberty is a great loss of self. And whenever you have any loss, there's mourning involved. And I think if they go all the way and do Death of a Grandparent or something like that in the third movie, I mean, Death of a Parent would be awful and gut-wrenching and hard, but
no,
I think
it wouldn't be the first movie. Disney's not used to that.
Sorry?
Most Disney movies have killed off a parent by the time the first movie starts.
True, but they haven't dealt with it.
No, I know. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Gosh, I think that'd be a step too far.
Yeah, but a grandparent, you're dealing with mourning, you're dealing with
Yeah.
feelings, and then mom and dad are there to help her through it. I think could be a really good way to do it.
I think I'd like to see a child-friendly version through Inside Out of. You have ever watched the Netflix show Big Mouth with Nick Kroll?
I've heard of it, and the guy who wrote it is a comedian I like.
Oh, Nick Kroll. Yeah. They do a lot of things that Inside Out is sort of teetering on, right? Shame and like a lot of these emotions, and they deal with depression and they deal with anxiety, all these different things that we're talking about, just definitely not appropriate for children, but they have these like high school type pieces that I think would play well in the Pixar world when done appropriate for families. I'd see that. I think a teenage high school piece would be an interesting one. I'd go for that one.
Yeah. The other thing that I like about 5 base emotions is that the original 5, I think, are perfect parallels to the Kubler-Ross 5 stages of grief.
Oh,
And to be able to have those apparent in both of the movies and dealing with grief in their different ways is very much being in tune with who we are as people, how our emotions guide us. When I'm officiating a funeral, I will very often tell the mourners, not in public space, but personally, that their grief is a sign that they loved someone, and how important it is to feel and be in touch with that feeling. Because if they were not grieving, it would be a totally different message as to their relationship with that person.
I wish we could have gotten Dr. Betsy Stone on this episode because I'm curious of the progression here. The first one dealt with memories, the second with beliefs. What happens in high school that is a shift in identity formation that we're not thinking about in terms of what's that next level of growth for Riley? Right? They teased us in the end of the first one about puberty. There was no tease on this one of what's next. And I'm curious of what that internal shift becomes from memory to belief to faith. And it doesn't have to be faith in a religion, but like there's a different form of faith that you hold as an identity. Or if there's something, I don't know. I'm curious of what that is. Betsy Stone, when you listen to this, please email us and let us know what the next step is.
Maybe a sense of self, that idea that once we have that fully formed frontal cortex, that we are able to more fluidly put the emotions we don't need behind the door.
I guess, but I feel like that's what the belief sculpture becomes, is that fluidity between the beliefs of who you like. You're not always, I'm a good person. You're not always, I'm not a good person. There's this fluctuating piece of you. And that's that identity that Riley has now formed. It's okay to have we have all of those positive, negative in between beliefs. And
on a more basic level, I saw it as representation that children tend to be very binary, yes, no, black, white.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw the sculpture initially as being part of that very binary thing. And as Riley began puberty and we saw that changes were happening, that the very static sort of sculpture didn't hold relevance anymore.
Yeah.
And what we developed at the end of the movie was a little more representative of the complexities and the feelings, and beginning to dive a little bit into those. I mean, maybe shades of gray is the right answer, but realizing it's not always this and it's not always this.
Yeah. And that perhaps even a better place to be, better than I'm a good person, I'm not a good person, is again that Mussar approach of I am trying to guide myself toward the middle. The thing with humility, Mussar encourages us to create our own mantras for each particular midah, each particular attribute. And at the same time, there are mantras that people just kind of know and use because, this person said it better than I can think of, so I'm going to use their mantra. And the one for humility is very often no more than my space, no less than my place. So that you're aware of that balance between the two. And I think maybe in a more developed sense of self, more developed belief system, instead of it fluctuating between I'm angry, I'm not angry, it would be more of I'm trying to move the match away from the fuse.
I like that the mantras appeared in this movie as the belief quotes of like, I'm a good person, or I only have value if I'm a firehawk, right? These became mantras, good or bad, but they're still mantras. So you have to find the right mantra that works for you. The overwhelming anxiety mantras became a bad version of Riley. And so just because you have those mantras doesn't mean it's going to work. Yeah, Mussar says, you have to find that right mantra.
Yeah.
As we wrap up, something else I'll mention that I really liked, I think it was the first movie where we saw flashbacks into the brains. Yeah, at the end of the movie, we saw flashbacks into the brains of different people. The clown from her nightmare, all of the memory balls in the background are a mixture of like fear and sadness.
Yeah,
All of them. Yeah.
Which is so typical comedian too,
Mhm.
because like they say that all professional comedians struggle with depression. And of course, all generalizations are false, but you hear this all the time that like that when I'm up on stage and I get that laughter, that's what I need to keep going.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that makes both Mussar and the Inside Out movies so beautiful is that they really speak to most people on such a beautiful level. Like there's no one who can look at this movie and go, well, it's just wrong. Like, yeah, you can say it's a repeat of the first one, but you can't deny that they do a really good job.
No, they do a great job. It just felt repetitive to me.
Well, for sure. It was the same plot,
Yeah.
but I loved it. And I look forward to seeing it on Disney Plus and slowing it down so I can find all the other afikomen.
Yeah.
So my wish for the two of you and for our dozens of listeners is that you find that balance, that when you are feeling inside out, that you can get that mantra and get in tune with that tikkun midot, that repairing of your soul traits that gives you the confidence to keep going, get on the team, and be the best partner, child, and parent that you can be. Well, that'll do it for this episode of Torah Smash. Our fiscal sponsor is Jewish Creativity International. Our theme music was created by Sean Fogel. You can check out Sean's bands and studio work at www.thesleepywest.com. After 2 incredible years of smashing Torah, we launched an epic summer fundraising campaign, and we want you, yes, you, to join us on this journey. Go to torahsmash.com/donate to help us reach our goals in Torah Smash's 5-year mission. Our boldly goal is to continue to talk about Judaism and nerd culture for at least 5 more years. So gather your dice, assemble the team, and let the adventure commence. Go to torahsmash.com/donate today and become a hero of Torah Smash's 5-year quest. If you enjoyed today's episode and you maybe don't have the funds to donate to us, but you want to show us how much you appreciate, please go rate and review Torah Smash wherever you listen. It helps others find us and is an excellent way to support the podcast. We want to hear from you and continue today's nerdy discussion. Go to torahsmash.com to find where to connect with us online, purchase swag from our store, support us with a donation, find previous episodes, and more. And what's going on inside the head of a Jewish nerd? Well, I have All Superheroes Are Actually Jews Island.
Oh, and there's All Summer Camp Color Wars need to include a Sci-Fi Day island in my head.
My dreidels are actually just 4-sided D&D dice island is my favorite.
I hope that's just a phase.
Say what you want. I think it's all beautiful.
How are there still staff members that don't know that you have a podcast, Ethan?
I'm not sure. Like, I wear the bucket hat every week at carpool. It's in the rotation. It's not a secret.
It's the name of the hockey team. Red something. Flame something. Fire something.
Woo!